If you've ever believed that honesty is the best policy, that vulnerability can be strength, and that sometimes the truth is more powerful than any rehearsed line, then you need to hear this story. Hit that like button and subscribe, because what happens when this single dad answers a simple question will remind you that authenticity changes everything. Asterisk asterisk. The question came on a rainy Thursday evening in November, in the fluorescent-lit waiting room of Riverside Elementary School. Ethan Parker had been sitting there for 20 minutes, waiting for his turn at parent-teacher conferences, when the woman beside him spoke. She was beautiful in an understated way, dark hair pulled into a messy bun, glasses perched on her nose, wearing jeans and a cardigan that had seen better days. She had been grading papers, red pen moving swiftly across student work, but now she looked up at him with a warm smile. "Are you married?" she asked. It was a simple question, an opening line, the kind of thing people asked all the time when they were interested in someone. Ethan could have given a simple answer, "No," or "I'm divorced," or even, "It's complicated." Instead, Ethan Parker looked at this woman. Later he would learn her name was Grace Hoffman, and she taught 4th grade, and gave an answer that stopped her cold. An answer so honest, so raw, so completely unexpected that it would change both of their lives. "My wife died 3 years ago," Ethan said quietly. "She was 8 months pregnant with our second child when she had a stroke. The doctor saved our daughter, but they couldn't save my wife. So I'm not married anymore. I'm a widower raising a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old by myself, and most days I'm barely holding it together. But I get up every morning because those 2 little girls need me, and I would do anything, absolutely anything, to give them the life their mother would have wanted them to have." Grace's pen slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Her eyes filled with tears. In that waiting room, surrounded by cheerful student artwork and the hum of conference room conversations, Ethan Parker's brutal honesty created a moment of such raw vulnerability that Grace felt like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have asked. That was too personal." "No," Ethan said, shaking his head. "You asked a normal question. And I'm tired of pretending my life is normal. I'm tired of giving people comfortable answers when the truth is that my life shattered 3 years ago, and I'm still trying to piece it back together. So when someone asks if I'm married, that's my answer. That's my truth." This is where our story truly begins. But to understand how Ethan Parker became a man who would answer a simple question with such devastating honesty, and how Grace Hoffman became a woman who needed to hear that answer, we need to go back. We need to understand the journey that brought them both to that elementary school waiting room on a rainy November evening. For years earlier, Ethan Parker had been living what he thought was a perfect life. He was 32 years old, happily married to his college sweetheart Sarah, and the father of a beautiful 3-year-old daughter named Maya. Sarah was 8 months pregnant with their second daughter, and they had already chosen her name, Emma. Ethan worked as a software developer for a tech startup. Sarah was a stay-at-home mom who loved every minute of motherhood. They owned a modest house in the suburbs with a backyard where Maya played on her swing set. They went to the park on weekends. They had couple friends they met for dinner. They were planning Maya's 4th birthday party. Life was good. Life was exactly what they had dreamed it would be. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in late October, while Ethan was at work and Maya was napping, Sarah collapsed in their kitchen. The neighbor who had agreed to watch Maya for an hour while Sarah went to a doctor's appointment found her unconscious on the floor when she arrived to pick up Maya. The ambulance arrived in minutes. The EMTs worked frantically. At the hospital, doctors discovered that Sarah had suffered a massive stroke caused by pregnancy complications. Her brain was bleeding. They needed to deliver the baby immediately to have any chance of saving either of them. Ethan arrived at the hospital to find his world in chaos. Doctors were prepping Sarah for an emergency C-section. She was unconscious, on life support. They told him the baby had a good chance of survival, but Sarah's prognosis was grim. The stroke had been catastrophic. Even if she survived, she would likely have severe brain damage. Emma was born at 3:47 p.m., weighing 5 pounds 3 ounces. She was tiny but healthy, her lungs strong, her vital signs stable. Ethan held his newborn daughter for the first time while his wife lay dying in an operating room 3 floors above. Sarah never regained consciousness. The doctors did everything they could, but the damage was too extensive. 2 days after Emma's birth, with Ethan holding her hand and 3-year-old Maya asleep in her grandmother's arms in the waiting room, Sarah Parker passed away. She was 31 years old. She never got to hold her second daughter. She never got to see Maya grow up. She never got to live the life she and Ethan had so carefully planned. The funeral was a blur. Ethan moved through it like a ghost, holding baby Emma and trying to explain to Maya in toddler-appropriate terms that Mommy had gone to heaven and wouldn't be coming home. Maya didn't understand. She kept asking when Mommy would be back. She kept looking for Sarah around every corner of their house. Ethan's parents flew in from Arizona and stayed for 2 weeks. Sarah's parents came from Oregon and stayed for 3. They helped with the baby, they cooked meals, they tried to support Ethan through his grief. But eventually, they had to go back to their own lives, and Ethan was left alone with 2 small children, and a grief so overwhelming it was hard to breathe. The first year was survival. Ethan took 12 weeks of paternity leave, which helped him bond with Emma and figure out the basics of caring for a newborn while also supporting a grieving toddler. But when he had to go back to work, reality hit hard. Childcare was expensive and complicated. He hired a nanny, but she quit after 3 months. He tried daycare, but Emma caught every illness that went around and Maya started having behavioral problems. Ethan was exhausted all the time. He would wake up at 5 a.m. to prepare bottles and breakfasts, get both girls dressed and ready, drop Maya at preschool and Emma at daycare, work a full day while worried about his children, pick them up, make dinner, give baths, read stories, get them to bed, and then collapse himself, only to do it all again the next day. There was no time for grief. No time to process the loss of his wife, his partner, his best friend. He had to function. He had to be strong for his daughters. So he buried his grief deep and kept moving forward. But grief doesn't stay buried. It seeps out in unexpected ways. Ethan found himself crying in the shower, the only place and time he had privacy. He found himself angry at small things: traffic, a spilled cup of juice, a lost shoe. He found himself avoiding other parents at Maya's preschool because he couldn't handle their well-meaning but painful questions about Sarah. When people asked if he was married, Ethan would say, "No," and change the subject. He didn't want to see the pity in their eyes. He didn't want to hear the awkward condolences. He didn't want to be the tragic widower. He just wanted to be normal, even though nothing about his life was normal anymore. By the time Maya started kindergarten and Emma turned 3, Ethan had developed a routine that worked, more or less. He had found a good after-school program for Maya and a wonderful home daycare provider for Emma. His job had allowed him to work flexible hours and partially from home. His parents visited regularly and provided support. He had learned to cook basic meals, do laundry without turning everything pink, and braid Maya's hair into something resembling the styles the other girls wore. From the outside, Ethan looked like he had it together. He showed up on time, his kids were clean and fed, he volunteered for school events, he smiled when people talked to him. But inside, he was still broken. He was still grieving. He was still pretending that his life was okay when it felt like it was held together with duct tape and desperate hope. Then came that November evening, 3 years after Sarah's death. Ethan had signed up for Maya's parent-teacher conference, dreading it slightly because these events always made him feel like he was being judged as a single parent. He arrived early and sat in the waiting area outside the first-grade classrooms, preparing himself to hear about Maya's academic progress and social development. That's when Grace Hoffman looked up from her grading and asked that simple question, "Are you married?" Later, Grace would tell Ethan that she had been working up the courage to talk to him for weeks. She had noticed him at school drop-offs and pickups, had seen him at school events, had been struck by how present and engaged he was with his daughter. She thought he was attractive, yes, but more than that, she was drawn to the gentle way he interacted with Maya, the patient way he tied her shoes and listened to her stories. Grace had assumed Ethan was divorced. Single dads at school drop-off were usually divorced, not widowed. She had decided that evening, sitting in the waiting room with this handsome father nearby, that she would try to strike up a conversation. Maybe get his number. Maybe see if he'd like to get coffee sometime. She had not expected his answer. She had not expected the raw grief and honesty that poured out of him. And she certainly had not expected her own reaction, the tears that immediately sprang to her eyes, the overwhelming empathy, the desire to gather this broken man into her arms and tell him it would be okay. Grace was 34 years old and had never been married. She had been engaged once, in her 20s, but her fiancé had cheated on her 3 months before the wedding. Since then, she had dated casually but had never found anyone who felt right. She had thrown herself into her teaching career, pouring her love and energy into other people's children, wondering sometimes if she would ever have her own family. Grace had learned to be cautious. She built walls around her heart. She kept relationships at arm's length. She had been hurt before, and didn't want to be hurt again. But sitting in that waiting room, listening to Ethan's honest, heartbreaking answer, Grace felt something crack in her carefully constructed defenses. "I'm Grace," she said after a long moment. "I teach 4th grade here. I've seen you with your daughter. She seems like a wonderful little girl." "She is," Ethan said, his expression softening. "Maya is the best thing in my life. Well, Maya and Emma, my younger daughter. They're the reason I keep going." "You're doing it alone?" Grace asked gently. "Yeah. My parents help when they can, but they live in Arizona." Sarah's parents are in Oregon. I have a few friends, but most of them are married with their own kids and busy lives. So mostly, yeah, it's just me and the girls. Grace didn't know why she did what she did next. Maybe it was the teacher in her, used to solving problems and helping people. Maybe it was the lonely woman who recognized loneliness in someone else. Maybe it was just instinct. Whatever it was, Grace heard herself saying, "If you ever need help or just someone to talk to, I'm here. I know we don't know each other, but I mean it. Parenting is hard enough with 2 people. Doing it alone after losing your wife, I can't even imagine." Ethan looked at her with surprise and something that might have been hope. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," Grace interrupted. "But I want to. Look, here's my number." She scribbled it on a piece of paper from her grading stack. "Text me if you need anything, even if it's just someone to vent to at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep." Ethan took the paper, staring at it like it was a lifeline. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You have no idea what that means." At that moment, a teacher called Ethan's name for his conference. He stood up, gave Grace one last grateful look, and disappeared into the classroom. Grace sat there for a long time after he left, her grading forgotten, wondering what had just happened and why she felt like her life had just shifted in some fundamental way. Ethan didn't text Grace that night, or the next night, or the night after that. He kept the paper with her number in his wallet, taking it out occasionally to look at it, wondering if he should reach out, but not knowing what to say. Part of him wanted to text her. Part of him was terrified. He hadn't connected with a woman as anything other than a friend since Sarah died. He didn't know if he was ready. 2 weeks after the parent-teacher conference, Emma came down with the flu. She was miserable, running a high fever, unable to keep anything down. Ethan stayed home from work to care for her, but he still had to get Maya to school somehow. His usual backup babysitter was out of town. His parents couldn't come on such short notice. He was stuck. At 7 a.m., desperate and exhausted after being up all night with a sick toddler, Ethan pulled out Grace's number and texted her. "I know this is asking a lot, but I'm in a bind. My younger daughter is sick, and I need to get my older daughter to school, but can't leave the sick one alone. Is there any way you could help? I can bring Maya to your classroom early if that's allowed." Grace's response came within minutes. "I get to school at 7:30. Bring Maya whenever you need to. She can help me set up the classroom. Don't worry about anything except taking care of your sick little one." Ethan nearly cried with relief. He got Maya dressed and in the car, drove to the school, and found Grace waiting by the entrance. Maya was shy at first, but Grace won her over quickly with warm smiles and the promise of being a special classroom helper. "Thank you," Ethan said to Grace, his voice thick with gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done. You would have figured something out," Grace said kindly. "But you don't have to figure everything out alone. How old is your sick one?" "Emma just turned 3. She's got a fever of 103 and can't keep anything down. Poor baby. Make sure you're giving her fluids in small amounts frequently. Popsicles can work well if she won't drink. And call the doctor if the fever doesn't come down in the next few hours. You sound like you've done this before." "I've been teaching for 12 years, Grace smiled. "I've seen every childhood illness imaginable." "You pick up a few things." That evening, after Maya came home from school full of stories about helping Miss Hoffman with the 4th graders, Ethan texted Grace again. "Thank you for saving the day. Emma's fever broke this afternoon. You were a lifesaver." "Grace, I'm so glad she's feeling better. Maya was wonderful today. She read to some of my students and helped me organize my classroom library. You're raising an amazing kid." "Ethan, I'm trying. Most days I feel like I'm failing." "Grace, you're not. Trust me, I see a lot of parents. You're one of the good ones." That text exchange led to more. Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Grace texted regularly. Nothing romantic, just friendly conversations about parenting challenges, teaching stories, life in general. Grace told him about her students. Ethan told her about his daughters and his work. They discovered they had similar senses of humor, similar values, similar struggles with work-life balance. Grace found herself looking forward to Ethan's texts. He was thoughtful and funny and honest in a way that was refreshing. He didn't try to impress her or play games. He was just himself, a grieving widower trying his best to raise his daughters and survive each day. Ethan found himself opening up to Grace in ways he hadn't with anyone since Sarah died. Grace didn't treat him like he was broken or pitiful. She didn't walk on eggshells around his grief. She acknowledged his loss, but didn't make it the only thing about him. She saw him as a whole person, not just a tragic widower. 2 months after the parent-teacher conference, in early January, Grace texted Ethan. Random question. Do you ever get a night off? Like, do your parents or someone watch the girls sometimes, so you can have adult time? Ethan. Not really. My parents come visit every few months, and they'll watch the girls while I run errands or whatever. But I haven't had what I'd call a night off in years. Grace. That's what I thought. Here's my proposal. I'd like to take you to dinner. As a thank you for being such a great parent to Maya, and for being my texting buddy these past few months. No pressure, no weirdness, just two adults having a meal without children demanding chicken nuggets. What do you think? Ethan stared at his phone for a full 5 minutes before responding. Was this a date? Did he want it to be a date? Was he ready for it to be a date? He thought about Sarah and felt a wave of guilt. But he also thought about how lonely he had been, how much he enjoyed talking to Grace, how nice it might be to have dinner with another adult. Ethan, I'd like that. But full disclosure, I'd need to find someone to watch the girls, and I'm really out of practice at this whole adult conversation thing. Fair warning that I might spend the whole dinner talking about my kids. Grace, I'm a teacher. I talk about kids all day. I can handle it. And I can help you find a sitter if you want. I know several responsible high school students who babysit. Grace did help Ethan find a sitter, a responsible 16-year-old named Hannah who was wonderful with the girls. The following Friday night, Ethan found himself getting ready for his first non-work-related adult dinner in over 3 years. He stood in front of his closet, suddenly unsure what to wear. Everything felt wrong. Too casual. Too formal. Too much like he was trying too hard. Finally, he settled on dark jeans and a button-down shirt. When he walked into the living room, where the babysitter was playing with Maya and Emma, Maya looked up and said, "Daddy, you look fancy. Where are you going?" "I'm having dinner with Miss Hoffman from school," Ethan said. Maya's eyes went wide. "Like a date?" "Like dinner with a friend," Ethan corrected, though his heart raced at the question. "Miss Hoffman is pretty," Maya observed. "And nice. I like her." "I like her too," Ethan admitted. The restaurant Grace had chosen was casual but nice, the kind of place with good food and a relaxed atmosphere. When Ethan arrived, Grace was already there, wearing a simple dress that made her look beautiful and put together. She smiled when she saw him, and Ethan felt some of his nervousness ease. "You made it," Grace said warmly. "I did, though I almost turned around 3 times on the drive here." "Nervous?" "Terrified," Ethan admitted. "I haven't done this in a really long time." "Well, let's make it easy," Grace said. "We're just 2 friends having dinner. No pressure. No expectations. Just good food and conversation." Dinner was easier than Ethan expected. Grace was a wonderful conversationalist, funny and smart and genuinely interested in what he had to say. They talked about teaching and technology, about their childhoods and their families, about books and movies, and all the normal things people talk about on first dates, though neither of them called it that. Eventually, inevitably, the conversation turned to Sarah. Grace asked about her gently, giving Ethan permission to talk about his late wife without making it awkward. "What was she like?" Grace asked. Ethan thought for a moment. "She was sunshine," he said finally. "That's the best way I can describe her. She lit up every room she walked into. She laughed all the time, at my terrible jokes, at silly things the kids did, at life in general. She found joy in everything. And she loved being a mom. It was what she always wanted, and she was amazing at it." "She sounds wonderful," Grace said softly. "She was. And I miss her every single day. But I'm also learning that I can miss her and still keep living. That I can honor her memory without letting grief consume me completely. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Grace said. "Grief isn't something you get over. It's something you carry with you. But you can carry it and still move forward." "That's exactly it," Ethan said, feeling understood in a way he rarely did. "Most people don't get that. They either expect me to be over it by now, or they expect me to never move on. Like there's some timeline for grief that I'm supposed to follow." "There's no timeline," Grace said firmly. "You grieve at your own pace, in your own way. and anyone who judges you for that doesn't understand loss. They talked for 3 hours. The restaurant staff started giving them looks as they lingered long after finishing their meals. Finally, reluctantly, they paid the check and walked out to the parking lot. "Thank you for tonight," Ethan said. "I didn't realize how much I needed this. Just time to be an adult, to have a conversation about something other than cartoon characters and bedtime routines." "Thank you for being honest with me," Grace replied. "When I asked if you were married that night at the school, you could have given me a simple answer. But you told me the truth, the whole complicated truth. That meant something to me." "Why?" Ethan asked curiously. Grace was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "Because I'm tired of people who aren't real. I'm tired of dating guys who pretend to be someone they're not, who say what they think I want to hear instead of what they actually think. Your honesty that night, it was refreshing. It was real. And I realized that's what I want. Someone who's real, even when real is messy and complicated." "I can definitely do messy and complicated," Ethan said with a small laugh. "That's pretty much my specialty." "Mine too," Grace admitted. "I'm 34, never married, teaching other people's kids while wondering if I'll ever have my own. I'm scared of getting hurt again, so I keep people at a distance. I'm pretty much a mess wrapped up in teacher cardigans and grading papers." "You hide it well," Ethan said. "So do you," Grace countered. "But I'm glad we're both done hiding, at least with each other." They stood in the parking lot, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Finally, Ethan said, "Can we do this again? Not necessarily dinner, but spending time together?" "I'd like that," Grace said. "But Ethan, I need you to know something. I'm not trying to replace Sarah. I'm not trying to be the girl's mother. I just want to get to know you and them and see where this goes. No pressure, no expectations. That's all I can offer right now anyway," Ethan said honestly. "Friendship time and the possibility that it might become something more. But I can't promise anything beyond that." "I don't need promises," Grace said. "I just need honesty. Keep being honest with me, even when it's hard, and we'll figure out the rest." Over the next 6 months, Ethan and Grace grew closer. They went on more, not dates, though they both knew they were dating even if they didn't use that word. Grace met Emma and slowly became a regular presence in the girls' lives. She came over for Sunday dinners. She helped with homework. She joined them at the park. The girls adored her. Maya, now 7, would talk nonstop about Miss Hoffman and how nice and pretty and fun she was. Emma, 3 years old and with no memory of her mother, started calling Grace Miss Grace and would run to hug her whenever she arrived. Ethan watched his daughters fall in love with Grace and felt both joy and guilt. Joy because they deserved to have a positive female presence in their lives. Guilt because it felt like they were replacing Sarah, even though Ethan knew intellectually that wasn't true. One evening, about 8 months after that first parent-teacher conference, Ethan and Grace were sitting on his porch after the girls had gone to bed. They had been dating officially for 3 months, though they had been building toward it for months before that. "Can I ask you something?" Grace said quietly. "Always. Do you feel guilty? About us?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I love Sarah. I still love Sarah. She was my first love, my best friend, the mother of my children. Part of me feels like being with you is betraying her somehow." "I understand that," Grace said, though Ethan could hear the hurt in her voice. "But," Ethan continued, taking her hand, "I've also been thinking a lot about what Sarah would want. And she wouldn't want me to be alone forever. She wouldn't want our daughters to grow up without experiencing what a healthy, loving relationship looks like. She was generous and kind, and I think she would want me to find happiness again." even if that happiness is with someone else. You think she'd approve of me? Grace asked, half joking, half serious. I think she'd love that you love our daughters. I think she'd appreciate that you don't try to replace her, but instead honor her memory while also being yourself. I think she'd be grateful that you see me as a whole person, not just a tragic widower or a project to fix. And I think she'd want me to tell you that I'm falling in love with you, even though that terrifies me. Grace's eyes filled with tears. I'm falling in love with you too. And I'm terrified too. But I think the best things in life are scary. Yeah, Ethan agreed. They are. They sat in silence for a while, holding hands, both contemplating the weight of what they had just admitted. Finally, Grace spoke again. I need to tell you something, she said, about why I've never been married. You don't have to. I want to, Grace interrupted. Remember how I said I was engaged once? What I didn't tell you was how badly that broke me. I found out my fiancé was cheating 3 months before our wedding with one of my bridesmaids. They had been sleeping together for over a year. The wedding was planned, the invitation sent, the dress bought. And I had to cancel everything and tell everyone why. Grace, I'm so sorry. It shattered my ability to trust people. I've kept every relationship since then at arm's length because I was terrified of being hurt again. But with you, Ethan, I can't seem to maintain that distance. You've gotten past all my defenses with your brutal honesty and your beautiful, broken heart. And that scares me because it means you have the power to hurt me. I don't want to hurt you, Ethan said fiercely. I know. But we're both damaged people trying to build something new. That's risky. We could break each other. Or we could heal each other, Ethan said. Grace, I can't promise I won't hurt you. I can't promise this will be easy. I have 2 kids, a demanding job, and a grief that still ambushes me at unexpected moments. But I can promise that I'll always be honest with you. I'll always tell you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Because that's what you deserve. Then we'll try, Grace said. We'll try to build something real, knowing that we're both scared and damaged and imperfect. And we'll be honest with each other every step of the way. A year after that parent-teacher conference, Ethan proposed to Grace. Not with a grand gesture or a public display, but quietly, privately, in his living room after the girls had gone to bed. He got down on one knee and said, Grace Hoffman, you came into my life when I thought I was done living and just surviving. You saw me at my most broken and didn't try to fix me. You just loved me anyway. You love my daughters like they're yours. You brought light back into our lives. Will you marry me? Grace said yes through tears. They told the girls the next morning. Maya squealed with excitement. Emma, now 4 years old, asked if she could call Grace Mommy. Grace, crying even harder, said, You can call me whatever feels right to you, sweetheart. The wedding was small and intimate. Just close family and friends. Maya and Emma were flower girls, wearing matching purple dresses and beaming with pride. During the ceremony, Ethan and Grace included a moment of silence to honor Sarah, acknowledging that she would always be part of their family story. In his vows, Ethan said, Grace, when you asked me if I was married that night at school, I could have lied. I could have given you an easy answer. But I told you the truth, the whole, messy, complicated truth. And you didn't run. You stepped closer. You chose to see my brokenness and love me anyway. That courage changed my life. Today, I promise to always tell you the truth, to always be honest about my feelings, to never hide my struggles or my joys from you. I promise to honor both the woman who gave me my daughters and the woman who gave us back our joy. Grace's vows were equally powerful. Ethan, when I asked if you were married, I wasn't expecting the answer you gave me. I wasn't expecting you to bare your soul to a stranger in an elementary school waiting room. But your honesty cracked open something in me that had been closed for years. Your willingness to be vulnerable gave me permission to be vulnerable too. Today, I promise to create a home where honesty is valued over comfort, where truth matters more than appearances, where we can all be our authentic selves, broken pieces and all. After the wedding, life settled into a new rhythm. Grace moved into Ethan's house, and they made it theirs together. The girls adjusted remarkably well to having Grace as a permanent presence. Emma started calling her Mama Grace. Maya, older and with clear memories of Sarah, kept calling her Grace or Miss Grace, and Grace never pushed for more. Grace and Ethan made a point of keeping Sarah's memory alive in their home. They had photos of Sarah displayed alongside photos of their new family. They talked about Sarah openly and honestly. On the anniversary of Sarah's death, they would all go to the cemetery together and tell Sarah about their year. 2 years after the wedding, Grace gave birth to a son, Benjamin. His arrival brought new joy, but also complicated emotions for everyone. Ethan felt the bittersweet reality that Sarah never got to raise Emma past infancy, while he was now getting to experience raising a baby with Grace. Maya and Emma were thrilled to have a baby brother. Grace worried about balancing attention between her biological son and her stepdaughters. Through it all, Ethan and Grace maintained their commitment to brutal honesty. When Ethan felt overwhelmed by guilt about being happy, he told Grace. When Grace felt insecure about not being the girl's biological mother, she told Ethan. When Maya struggled with conflicting feelings about loving both her, real mom, and Grace, they talked about it openly. They made mistakes. They had arguments. They hurt each other unintentionally. But they always came back to honesty, to truth, to the commitment they had made to each other in that parking lot years ago, to be real, even when real was messy. 5 years after that parent-teacher conference, Ethan was invited to speak at a conference for widowed parents. Standing in front of a room full of people who understood his pain, Ethan told his story. He talked about Sarah's death, the devastating grief, the struggle of single parenthood. But he also talked about that November evening when a teacher asked him if he was married. "I could have said no," Ethan told the audience. "I could have given a simple answer and kept my grief private. But I was tired of pretending. I was tired of hiding my pain behind polite answers. So I told her the truth, the whole, ugly, complicated truth about my dead wife and my motherless daughters and my barely held together life. And you know what happened?" Ethan paused, looking out at the crowd. "She didn't run. She didn't treat me like I was broken. She saw my honesty and matched it with her own. And that honesty became the foundation of the best relationship I've ever had, except for my marriage to Sarah. Grace isn't a replacement for Sarah. She's a different kind of love, built on a different foundation. But she's real, and that reality is what we both needed." After the speech, multiple people approached Ethan to share their own stories. A widowed mother who had been hiding her grief behind a brave face. A widowed father who had been pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. A widow who had been dating but lying about her past because she was ashamed of her grief. To each of them, Ethan said the same thing. Tell the truth. Be honest about your pain. The right people won't run from your honesty. They'll step closer because of it. That evening, Ethan came home to find Grace in the kitchen making dinner while Maya helped and Emma entertained baby Benjamin. It was chaos, toys everywhere, vegetables being chopped, a toddler demanding attention, a baby fussing. But it was beautiful chaos. It was real. It was home. "How was the speech?" Grace asked, looking up from the cutting board. "Good. Emotional. I told our story." "The whole story?" "The whole story. From Sarah's death to you asking if I was married to where we are now." Grace smiled. "And what was the lesson?" That honesty is scary but necessary. That telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, is what builds real connections. That being vulnerable is how we find the people who will love us for who we really are, not who we pretend to be. Sounds like a good lesson, Grace said. That night, after the kids were in bed, Ethan and Grace sat on their porch as they often did. It had become their ritual, this quiet time to talk about their days, their struggles, their joys. "Do you ever regret asking me if I was married that night?" Ethan asked. Grace laughed. "Never. Though I'll admit, I wasn't expecting the answer I got." "Do you regret how you answered?" "Not for a second. If I had lied or deflected, we wouldn't be here. You asked a question, and I gave you the truth. The most honest answer I could give. And that honesty changed everything." "It did," Grace agreed. "For both of us." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars, holding hands, thinking about the journey that had brought them here. A journey that started with a simple question and an unexpected answer. A journey built on honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to be real even when real was messy. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of honesty and vulnerability, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to tell the truth, that being real is more powerful than being perfect, that the right people will love you for your honesty, not despite it. ****. The message of Ethan and Grace's story is profound. Honesty changes everything. When that teacher asked Ethan if he was married, he could have given a safe answer. He could have said no and left it at that. He could have protected himself from vulnerability, from the risk of being seen as broken or pitiful. But he chose honesty instead. Raw, unfiltered, uncomfortable honesty. ****. And that honesty didn't push Grace away, it drew her closer. Because authentic connection can only happen when we're willing to be authentic. Real relationships can only be built on real truth. ****. We live in a world that encourages us to curate our lives, to present only the best versions of ourselves, to hide our pain and our struggles behind carefully constructed facades. We're taught to answer, "How are you?" with, "I'm fine," even when we're falling apart. We're taught to keep our grief private, our struggles hidden, our vulnerabilities concealed. ****. But Ethan's story shows us a different way. When he told Grace the truth about his dead wife, and his struggling family, and his barely held together life, he gave her permission to be honest too. His vulnerability created space for her vulnerability. His realness invited her realness. ****. And together, they built something beautiful on that foundation of truth. So here's the challenge. What truth are you hiding? What honest answer are you afraid to give? What vulnerability are you concealing behind polite deflection? ****. Maybe someone asks how you're doing, and instead of saying, "Fine," you tell them the truth about your struggle. Maybe someone asks about your past, and instead of giving the sanitized version, you tell them what really happened. Maybe you finally admit to someone, or to yourself, that you're not okay, that you need help, that you're scared or lonely or broken. ****. That kind of honesty is terrifying. It makes you vulnerable. It risks judgment and rejection and pity. But it also creates the possibility for real connection, for authentic relationships, for love that sees all of you and chooses you anyway. ****. Ethan didn't find Grace by pretending to be okay. He found her by admitting he wasn't. He didn't build a relationship by hiding his pain. He built it by being honest about his struggle. And that honesty became the foundation of a love that was real, deep, and lasting. ****. Your honesty can do the same thing. Your vulnerability can create connections you never imagined possible. Your willingness to tell the truth, the whole, messy, complicated truth, can change your life. Asterisk asterisk. So the next time someone asks you a simple question, consider giving them an honest answer. Not the answer you think they want to hear. Not the answer that makes you look good. But the truth, asterisk asterisk. Because the truth, as Ethan learned that night in an elementary school waiting room, has the power to change everything. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to this story. Thank you for believing that honesty matters, that vulnerability is strength, and that real connections are worth the risk. Asterisk asterisk. Now go out there and tell your truth. The world needs more people brave enough to be real. Asterisk asterisk.